Imagine waking up in Britain and beginning your day without checking your phone. There are no text messages, no emails, no Google, no YouTube, and no social media. The internet simply doesn't exist. It may sound impossible today, but for millions of British people, this was completely normal. Before the internet changed the world, life moved at a very different pace. People didn't spend hours looking at screens. Instead, they spent more time talking face to face, visiting neighbours, reading newspapers, and enjoying simple moments with family and friends. Children played outside until sunset, and parents rarely worried about where they were because the whole neighbourhood looked out for one another. In those days, information wasn't available with a single click. If you wanted to learn something, you visited the local library, opened an encyclopedia, or asked someone who knew the answer. Patience was simply part of everyday life. Planning a holiday meant visiting a travel agent. Paying bills meant standing in a queue at the bank. Shopping required a trip into town, and keeping in touch with loved ones often meant writing letters that could take several days to arrive. Looking back today, many people remember this period with great affection. Life may have been slower, but it also felt simpler, quieter, and in many ways more personal. Relationships were built through real conversations rather than instant messages, and communities were often much closer than they are today. In this video, we're traveling back to the Britain that existed before the internet transformed everyday life. We'll explore how people communicated, worked, studied, shopped, and entertained themselves during an era that younger generations can hardly imagine. So let's step back in time and discover what life was really like for the last generation to grow up without the internet in Britain. Before the internet, staying in touch with friends and family required time, patience, and effort. There were no instant messages, no video calls, and no social media notifications. Every conversation felt more personal because people couldn't simply send a quick text whenever they wanted. For most British families, the home telephone was the fastest way to communicate. But unlike today, not every house had one. Many families shared a single telephone, and children often had to ask permission before making a call. Conversations were usually kept short because long-distance calls could be expensive. If someone didn't have a telephone, the famous red British telephone box became an important part of everyday life. People carried coins in their pockets, stepped inside the phone box, and waited patiently to make their calls. These iconic red boxes became one of the most recognizable symbols of Britain. Letters were even more important than phone calls. Whether it was writing to grandparents, relatives serving in the military, or friends living in another town, handwritten letters connected people across the country. Every letter was carefully written, placed inside an envelope, stamped and posted into the nearest Royal Mail post box. Receiving a letter was a special moment. Families often looked forward to hearing the sound of the postman arriving each morning. Unlike today's instant communication, every message took days to arrive, making each letter feel far more meaningful. Neighbours also communicated differently. Instead of sending a message first, people simply walked to each other's houses, knocked on the front door, and asked if someone was home. Unexpected visits were completely normal, and communities were much closer because people met face to face every day. Looking back today, communication before the internet may seem slow, but many people believe it created stronger relationships. Conversations were longer, letters were treasured for years, and spending time together mattered far more than staring at a screen. Before the internet, entertainment in Britain was completely different from what we know today. There was no Netflix, no YouTube, no TikTok, and no endless scrolling on smartphones. Families had far fewer choices, but they often spent much more time together. Television was one of the biggest sources of entertainment, but unlike today, there were only a handful of channels to choose from. Most families watched programs on the BBC or ITV, gathering together in the living room every evening. Popular dramas, comedy shows, documentaries, and the evening news became shared experiences across the country. Because millions of people were watching the same program at exactly the same time. Children couldn't simply pick a cartoon whenever they wanted. They had to wait until their favorite program was broadcast, and if they missed it, there was no replay or catch-up service. This made television feel much more special, and families planned their evenings around their favorite shows. Music was another huge part of British life. People listened to the radio every day, discovering new songs and following the latest charts. Vinyl records filled homes across Britain, and record players became the heart of many family gatherings. The 1960s also brought legendary British bands that changed music forever, making Britain one of the world's biggest music capitals. When families wanted entertainment away from home, they visited local cinemas, theatres, or football matches. Weekend trips to the cinema were a favourite tradition, while football stadiums filled with passionate supporters every Saturday. These outings created memories that lasted a lifetime. On rainy days, families often stayed indoors, playing board games, card games, or completing jigsaw puzzles together. Children also spent hours reading comics, storybooks, and magazines instead of looking at screens. Imagination played a much bigger role, because entertainment depended more on creativity than technology. Looking back today, entertainment before the internet may seem simple, but many people remember it as a happier time. Instead of everyone sitting quietly with their own devices, families laughed together, talked together, and created moments that no app or website could ever replace. Before computers transformed the workplace, almost every job in Britain relied on paper, handwriting, and manual effort. Offices looked very different from the modern workplaces we know today. There were no laptops on desks, no email inboxes, and no cloud storage. Every document had to be created, organized, and stored by hand. One of the most important office tools was the typewriter. Secretaries and office workers spent hours typing letters, reports, and business documents one key at a time. If a mistake was made, correcting it wasn't as simple as pressing the backspace key. Often, the entire page had to be typed again, requiring patience and precision. Filing cabinets filled with thousands of paper records lined office walls. Companies stored customer information, invoices, and contracts inside large folders, carefully organized so they could be found when needed. Finding a single document could take several minutes or even hours compared with today's instant computer searches. Banks, government offices, and businesses all depended on handwritten records and paper forms. Accountants used calculators or completed complex calculations by hand, while managers reviewed stacks of paperwork every day. Everything moved more slowly, but people became highly organized because there was no technology to do the work for them. Factories also relied heavily on skilled workers rather than automated machines. Manufacturing cars, clothing, furniture, and household goods required thousands of people working together. Britain was known for its strong industrial workforce, and many families depended on factory jobs for their income. Communication between businesses was slower as well. Important documents were delivered by post or courier, and urgent messages were sent by telephone rather than email. Meetings were held face-to-face because there were no online video calls or virtual conferences. Looking back today, it's hard to imagine working without computers. Modern technology has made many jobs faster and easier, but many people believe the workplace of the past encouraged greater patience, stronger practical skills, and more personal interaction between colleagues. The internet has completely transformed life in Britain. Today, almost everything can be done with a few taps on a smartphone. We can shop online, pay bills instantly, watch thousands of films, speak to someone on the other side of the world, and find answers to almost any question within seconds. There's no doubt that modern technology has made life faster and far more convenient. Businesses work more efficiently, students have unlimited access to information, and families can stay connected no matter where they are. Many everyday tasks that once took hours can now be completed in just a few minutes. But while we've gained incredible convenience, many people believe we've also lost something valuable along the way. Before the internet, neighbors knew each other by name. Children spent hours playing outside instead of staring at screens. Families often ate dinner together without phones interrupting every conversation. Friendships were built through real conversations, shared experiences, and face-to-face meetings rather than likes, followers, and notifications. People also learned patience. If you wanted to watch a favorite television program, you waited for it to be broadcast. If you needed information, you visited the library. If you wanted to speak to someone, you either visited them or waited for them to answer the telephone. Life moved at a slower pace, but many people remember it as being less stressful and more meaningful. Of course, life before the internet wasn't perfect. Finding information was harder, traveling required more planning, and staying in touch with distant family members took much longer. Modern technology has solved many of these problems and improved everyday life in countless ways. Perhaps the real lesson isn't that one generation lived better than another. Instead, every generation has experienced a different way of life. The pre-internet generation enjoyed stronger local communities and simpler routines, while today's generation enjoys speed, convenience, and endless opportunities. The question is, have we gained more than we've lost, or have we sacrificed something truly special in exchange for technology? As we come to the end of this journey, it's incredible to see just how much Britain has changed in only a few decades. The last generation to grow up without the internet experienced a world that was slower, quieter, and, in many ways, far more personal. There were no smartphones in every pocket, no social media updates every few minutes, and no instant access to endless information. Instead, people built friendships face to face, wrote handwritten letters, played outside until sunset, and spent evenings talking with family rather than looking at screens. Today's world offers amazing technology and opportunities that previous generations could never have imagined. We can communicate instantly across the globe, learn almost anything online, and access entertainment whenever we want. These advances have changed our lives in remarkable ways, yet many people who lived through Britain's pre-internet years still remember that era with great affection. They remember stronger communities, closer neighbours, quieter streets, and a lifestyle where time seemed to move a little more slowly. It wasn't a perfect world, but it was a world filled with moments that many people still treasure today. Perhaps the greatest lesson isn't that one generation had a better life than another. Instead, every generation has experienced a unique chapter of history. The internet has transformed Britain forever, but it has also reminded us how quickly the world can change. Now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think life was better before the internet, or would you never want to live without it? If you grew up during those years, we'd love to hear your memories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into Britain's past, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another documentary about classic Britain, forgotten history, and everyday life from the past. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.